Right, RSS podcast is back, and we have very, very special guest today, Lenny Vigden, aka graphic designer, aka art director, and all-round creative, based out of New York. How's it going, man? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's going well. How are you?
Yeah, all good. I think just before we started recording, I was saying that I was going to say easing my way back into the new year, but I'm thinking I'm being
For sure.
thrust back into the new year. Very, very busy, lots of stuff going on. Can't complain. And how's it out in New York right now?
It's good. It's good. It's a little chilly, but I think the energy is coming back for sure. People are excited to like get the new year going, and as am I. So totally. I'm
Nice.
stoked.
Where
Yeah.
whereabouts are you based?
I'm in Manhattan,
Oh, nice.
which is where I kind of grew up. So yeah, been here for a minute.
Nice.
Yeah.
So just like backyard type feeling.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. I'm in the thick of it for sure.
Nice. Cool. So I think the best place to try and kick this off, because we're going to talk about art predominantly and kind of graphics or branding and kind of like creative outlets, and they'll also intertwine with music, which is obviously good. So we can start off with two questions. We'll start off with one first, and I guess like what was the sort of starting point or the first like piece of like art or branding or something from kind of early on in your childhood potentially, which kind of spawned this kind of passion for creativity and art direction and graphics?
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in Tokyo and lived there till I was 10 years old before we moved to New York. And as you probably know, Tokyo is kind of like the mecca for like physical media. And this was also like the height of when like, stores like HMV and Tower Records and Virgin were just like all over the city. So I feel like I remember going to like, these stores as a kid with my parents and just being like blown away by like, thousands of like different kinds of like records and album covers that were just like in my face. And I know you're always kind of told to like not judge a book by its cover, but I think I just like totally intuitively was like, what is this? Like, what is that? I specifically remember picking up uh an Offspring record. I think this was like, late 90s when the Offspring were like just like totally hot and
Massive, yeah.
being like, wow, like what is this? Like I need to get this record and being like, yeah, like like people like there's a job out there where like you can actually like make album art and like, do the design for bands and be a part of this world. And I was like, I think I want to do this. And um, yeah, I think it just kind of happened naturally after that. And again, I was always kind of, you know, into music, both being exposed in Tokyo and New York and yeah, just being, surrounded by really great art and design.
Do you remember what was popping off in Tokyo at the time before you kind of moved over?
Um, uh,
Was,
I
was there
mean,
anything like global, or was there stuff local that was popping off as well, like kind of like local stars, or like what was kind of
there,
being
I mean,
transmitted over
for
that
sure,
way?
for sure. I mean, of course, there's like Japan has its own industry of local Japanese artists, but I think I was purposely trying to avoid that. I think a lot of kids, especially like, my friends that I grew up with who were kind of like, sons and daughters of like expats and, had much more of like American cultural exposure than I did, were like really trying to listen to like what was, popular in the States, which at the time I think was kind of like the start of like, more like clubby hip hop and rap. Like 50 Cent, I think, had like dropped his first album.
Got it.
Yeah, right, right. And then all of like, the New York hip hop guys, like everyone from like Rockefeller Records and Dipset and Cameron, Joel Santana, like those kind of guys. So I think I was into a lot of that.
Mhm.
Also a lot of like bad pop punk kind of stuff, which was really popular. Like The Offspring and Blink 182, that
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was really just all of like, anything that was on MTV, I guess, which is because we also got MTV, and it was like a Japanese like remix of what was being played on like MTV in the States, but
Yeah.
we got all of that as well. Yeah.
Amazing. So I guess like when you, I guess probably tapping into the kind of the US big rap acts that were being pushed at the time, and then actually moving to New York. I bet that was some kind of. I bet you were kind of, yeah, buzzing, right?
Oh,
Like
for sure,
towards.
definitely. I mean,
And
especially like, with hip hop and rap, because I think that was like when, New York was kind of like at its peak with that, and then just like really being like actually exposed to it, in first person was pretty great. But there was like there was also like, a lot of other like cool things happening in the New York, music scene around then as well. Like it was kind of like the start of bands like the Strokes and the Yeah-Yeahs, and of course like LCD Sound System. So I think that was my first time being exposed to kind of like that type of music, which also really kind of shaped the way that I saw graphic design and the type of art that I wanted to make. And yeah.
so what was the I guess how did the sort of like schooling transition go from Tokyo to New York, and I guess like, yeah, how did that path kind of lead into kind of more commercial work, I guess? Like how did that, and yeah, the work, the career, and the music that you were kind of hearing at the time, how did that all stitch together then after the move?
Yeah, it kind of happened like, pretty naturally, I guess. Like obviously like New York and Tokyo are culturally very, very different. But in other respects, they're also very similar, in terms of like how accessible everything is. Both from like a practical side, but also like, the art side of it as well. So I think it was just like so easy for me to like be exposed to the art scene and the music scene in New York. And I definitely carried that with me when I moved from Tokyo to New York. And I just really kind of like fell in love with the city. I just thought it was such an interesting, vibrant place for like a young kid to be exposed to, for better or for worse. But yeah, I made a decision like, later on in high school that this is like where I wanted to be. This is where I want to stay. And I want to like immerse myself further in the art scene and, go to art school here. Ended up at SVA and was, went in thinking that I like knew everything about design. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna crush it. Obviously, just knew nothing and was like surrounded by kids that were like so much more talented than me. But that I think that really kind of like fueled my hunger a little bit more, and to really, push myself to be an actual uh skilled and knowledgeable designer, and not just like someone that was kind of fucking around with in Photoshop and not really knowing what he was doing. Um, yeah, and then out of college, I ended up in advertising and was working at an ad agency for 3 years. And it was much more like corporate work. A lot of their clients were kind of like Fortune 500 companies.
Mhm.
But it was fun. It was really challenging. I just like really kind of loved the environment, and more importantly, I just like loved being able to collaborate with other people, and being surrounded by super creative, really smart people.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then I guess like obviously throughout that time you're, yeah, I guess what you're being exposed to music wise, I guess outside of the kind of the sort of the art world in the kind of advertising space, like what else
Yeah.
was going on at that time? Were there any kind of particular spots, clubs, like hangouts, kind of spots like that you would kind of frequent and see certain shows or all that sort of thing?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I was definitely like, I think this was kind of when the log house sort of movement was getting really popular, especially in New York. And that was kind of like my first exposure to like, electronic music. I remember again like picking up a Justice CD. and I thought like, the art direction was so cool. And then of course the music kind of just like blew me away. I was like, wow, like I've never heard anything like this. This is like this is the new shit for sure. So I was
Yeah,
going out a lot to like I think like Webster Hall had a
got it.
lot of these kind of like blog housey type of nights. Like Justice DJ'd there a few times. There were other clubs like downtown and like the Village, and also like the Meatpacking that hosted a lot of these guys. But I just became obsessed with like Ed Banger Records and all of like the French house DJs, especially because a lot of them were graphic designers and they kind of like made this transition into music. And then like, so I think like their sort of like knowledge in art direction, and maybe it's advertising, but like their super savvy kind of like sense of design like really shaped the way they formed these labels. And it wasn't just about music. Like they were making like awesome t-shirts and like throwing really cool parties and just creating like this whole like environment that like, yeah, again, like went outside of music and just hit all these areas like fashion, film. Yeah, and I think that just like really had a huge influence on me. And I was like, this is what I want to do, like for sure. Like, so I started DJing, I was throwing a little bit of parties as well. Really kind of like, getting involved in like the New York nightlife scene. And then I guess that's kind of how I met Tyler. And yeah. So like my early like I guess kind of um more like passionate like design gigs were like all around just like making flyers for friends and doing SoundCloud album covers and stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, the that kind of era, like early to mid 2000s, probably even towards the late 2000s as well, like when the whole Bloghouse then turned into the whole
Hmm.
like Ed Banger. There was several like sub labels that came out of France under
Yeah.
various different guises. Yes, used to snap up all those records myself, man.
Yeah.
um
Oh, for sure.
yeah, like they made like a big kind of wave in that era. And yeah, like you said,
Totally.
alongside whilst LCD were kind of blowing up as well at the same time. So
Hmm.
um yeah, like two sort of different sounds, but sort of part of the same sort of, I don't know, consciousness or whatever. But it was
Yeah.
it was a kind of a good time in music and in cultural round. And yeah, like to your point, like the I don't know, a lot of labels can start out and not necessarily have like a point of view artistically or graphically, but you knew from the off with Ed Banger and the associated labels that there was
Hmm.
like you said, there was a very strong point of view on how things looked, how things were ran. So yeah, like there's a lot to be said for like the aesthetic and the world they created around the labels and all that sort of stuff.
Totally.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so
Sure.
when did you first meet Tyler then? Was that at a party, or yeah, when did you guys cross paths?
It was actually a little later. I think we met around the time they reunited. So they had already like broken up as a band and they put on kind of like a reunion show at Webster Hall, I believe. And we didn't meet at that show, but we met briefly after when Tyler, I think, was still hanging out in the city. Through a mutual friend, I had just heard like from this friend. I was like, hey, like I met Tyler from LCD Sound System and he's starting his own record label. I was like, and needed some graphic design help. Like, are you interested? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah,
of course, yeah.
all over it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think I was like just out of college, so like maybe 22 years old at the time, in advertising at that ad agency. And yeah, I mean I was so stoked, I was like, fuck yeah, like that is a dream project, 100%.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we ended up linking. I don't think Tyler knew that I was just like a huge fan of the band. Like I don't think he even knew like that I knew him as like, as like this incredible like superstar musician. And I tried to play cool, but I was just like kind of like completely starstruck in a way.
Yeah, geeking out.
But yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think we just like totally hit it off. I think I just like really kind of got the vibe instantly, and we both really kind of agreed and like vibed on like the references that we were talking about, and like it really kind of came from this sort of, ephemeral like punk and rave and electronic sort of world. I think a lot of the references we were looking at were like, just like flyers from that era and even earlier, and it was just like fun really kind of like researching that. And yeah.
Nice. So the I guess like yeah, I guess like when you've worked on record sleeves and stuff before, like what's the process like working with Tyler? Is it usually like as yeah, explain how that kind of like collaboration process works. I think I always find that interesting, like as part of the process when you're working with different people, collaborating with people. If it's a one-off, maybe you collaborate with them on an ongoing basis. It really varies relationship to relationship in terms of like how people like to
Yeah.
work, right? So it'd be cool to just get a little glimpse of like, yeah, I guess how the process works really, because the covers and the artwork and everything you've worked on is amazing. So it'd be good to yeah, understand a bit more about the process really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's totally like, different with each person. But I think at like the core of it, I really like, because I do consider myself like a pretty conceptual designer, and I guess like what I mean by that is like I like doing a lot of research before, I get into like the actual designing of it. And in some cases, I think like that part is even like more important than like, what the actual outcome is, even though you don't really see it. But yeah, I guess that's kind of where it starts with everything, and specifically with the work that I've done with Tyler. Again, like we've always kind of loved looking at like rave flyers from like the 90s, or like hardcore flyers from California in the 80s. So I think I was pulling a lot of like references from that. And Tyler luckily just kind of trusted me. I don't know why, but to just like, kind of do whatever I want, which is always a little bit hard when a client just uh gives you the freedom to like do anything.
Yeah. I
But
think
I think go on, sorry.
no, I was gonna say I think I think you touched on it earlier, but I think when you I don't know, when you have a conversation with someone and they know, I.e. in Tyler's case, that you get the vibe type thing and you're mutually aware of what's going on, then yeah,
Sure.
it's nice to be able to have that trust from somebody you're working with for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Especially because like I think it's a world that we're both like very familiar with, and it's a world where like, Tyler really like lived through. So I think there is something like, really personal for both of us. I mean, especially for him.
Mhm.
When we kind of like reference those two worlds, and bring design elements from those two spaces. Um, yeah, and but there's also something to be said about like not like mirroring something too closely to that space and world as well, because then I think it also becomes a little gimmicky in a way. So I do in a lot of these in a lot of like the artwork that I did for him, like try to like, make it a little bit, I don't know if like if contemporary is the right word, but it's like I try to like um just like spice it up a little bit, bring in my own kind of like personal aesthetic into it, and make it feel as if it's like something like reinvented and new, but still referencing a lot of like um these just like, classic kind of design elements from both two worlds.
It's definitely a fine line, isn't it? You're like when
Yeah,
you're trying to reference the past without being, like you say, without being too gimmicky. and it being like a straight kind of, like you say, like for like, you're just editing out some bits, and then
Yeah,
you're
for
trying to
sure, for sure.
obviously trying to add something new into the mix. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
be it updating it in some way, or I mean, that in itself, that's the work, right?
Yeah, no,
It's like
exactly, exactly.
it's finding the right balance of the project.
100%. I always kind of like compare it to like sampling in music. Um, because if you're sampling, like a disco record and everyone knows what it is, like it's kind of like boring, and you're just like you kind of come off as like someone not really like doing the work. You really want to like find like the deep cut and not know where like that, you want people to not know where that came from. And then also like, chopping up even like, smaller and smaller and smaller to make it almost like completely unrecognizable is also something you want to do. And I feel like I try to sort of bring that process into design as well. Like I want to find these sort of deep cut references that maybe not a lot of people have seen. And Tyler's actually like really good at that. Like he will show me an album cover that I've never heard of, and it will just be like the most like wild mental thing I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's definitely got a lot of good references, and
Yeah.
it's great, like, yeah, fuel to the creative fire, man. So like, I guess, like, talking about the teas specifically, then, like, how did that process work? And like, was there, I think you might have done more than two designs in total, but the two designs that we'll talk about, the one with the dinosaur on, and then the other one, which was the logo tee with the graphic print on the back.
Hmm.
Yeah, talk to us a bit more in detail about those, and how that, and where the jump off point for that was, and how you kind of narrowed down to where we landed on, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I guess for the teas, they were like a little bit more literal in terms of like where we were kind of like borrowing the aesthetic and design, which was really like, again, from like, hardcore punk flyers and then like 90s rave flyers. The one with the dinosaur, yeah, that was kind of, I guess, like the more like hardcore sort of direction. I think I literally took like the text on it. I can't remember exactly what it says, but like from a hardcore flyer. And then I just yeah, I thought that was really fun because I think it was kind of just like in a way it was just like very sort of random. I didn't want to like try to think too much about it, but I was just like throwing some stuff on and like doing like weird processes on it and tried to make it feel like it just I guess like kind of going back to something that feels gimmicky. I was thinking about that and I was like, how do like we wanted this to look like, a hardcore like flyer almost, but like I just like I didn't want it to be like, I didn't want to think about it too much. So I think I was just like literally like throwing stuff on it and I was like, all right,
Just get everything in there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then for the other one, that was also based on like a 90s rave flyer in New York. And I just like kind of recreated that. And there's some like, little Easter eggs in there. And I think for t-shirts it's a little bit different because I do feel like maybe people want to be able to like recognize where it's coming
A
from like a little bit
reference,
more.
or
Yeah, it's like, why people I guess like wearing band t-shirts so much maybe, or even like sports t-shirts, or like, oh yeah, I went to this city and got this t-shirt and like, yeah.
yeah, I know what you're saying. I think the designs are great. I think, like, I find it funny how I feel like the punk aesthetic and they're not too distant anyway, but the punk and the rave
Yeah.
aesthetic, they marry so well graphically. Um, I think,
Yeah, that's an interesting point for sure. Yeah.
I think, even though you wouldn't necessarily put them, in the same category or whatever, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of DIY aesthetic
Totally.
that's in both kind of genres, elements of culture. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess that's maybe the tie-in, but I don't know. On paper, if you said it, if you said about kind of meshing the two aesthetics together, it might not necessarily, you know, but I think it works super well. And yeah, I bet it was fun kind of digging through and picking out which bits to try and work with.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. There's so many amazing resources on the internet of like, you know, I was just like going through like Reddit and stuff of these guys from both worlds that have like, you know, that have collected thousands and thousands of you know, both rave and hardcore flyers. It was so fun going through those, and I've got a few really good books on them as well. But yeah, there is a really like interesting aesthetic between the two that are very similar in a way. And I think like conceptually and like philosophically they share a lot of like similar values. So yeah, maybe that's why they end up working together pretty well. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a strong look for interference pattern anyway. I'm loving the vibe, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm stoked to see people rocking it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dropping soon, dropping soon.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the studio that you set up then, Studio Provoke, and yeah, talk to us a little bit about how that come about and kind of like what you're working on and what the kind of aims are really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I guess like the idea of, you know, launching my own studio started brewing around the pandemic. I wasn't really, you know, like the start of the pandemic, I wasn't really doing much work. And I think like, I mean, I don't think like anyone was really doing anything, but, you know, through this period of just like spending a lot of time alone in my apartment and not seeing friends or family and, not being, you know, not having the life that I like, you know, once had in the city, you know, going out and seeing music and going to shows and stuff. I just started watching, I was just watching like a ton of movies and realized like how much I loved film. And I was thinking like how I really was like thinking like kind of like conceptually about film and movies and the purpose of it and how and why like, you know, people love it so much and how it's just like such a relatable medium. And I was like, this is kind of like the lowest common denominator in art in terms of like, you know, how easy it is for people to relate to it and how
Mhm.
easily exposed people are to it. As opposed to like, I don't know, like abstract sculptures and stuff like that. You know, no one really like goes to a gallery and sees a piece of like, you know, sculpture and be like, okay, like this is it. Like I totally get it, like
Life
whatever.
changing, yeah,
Yeah, yes. So I thought there were a lot of similarities to like design as well, in terms of a medium that's like super accessible and utilitarian. It's made for people to just kind of like understand pretty immediately. And you know, of course, it's just you're just um surrounded by it, you know.
yeah. Hmm.
So I think that sort of so it happened like two different ways. So like, you know, first I was like, all right, I want to be a part of like, you know, making movies and I really want to get into like the film world.
Hmm.
Of course I'm not a film. I wasn't, you know, I didn't consider myself a filmmaker. I was just like, you know, I want to do like titles for films. Like I think like, you know, being a graphic designer for that world would be super cool. And I didn't really know anyone that had, you know, personally that had like, you know, been doing that.
Hmm.
So I spent a lot of the time like during the pandemic, just like talking to people that I knew that were kind of in this world, and then got involved with like, you know, a couple short films doing the titles and posters for. And then I got to work on a feature film and did the titles for that. And I started building like a small portfolio of work that was like really more focused on film. And then compared to like, you know, the work I was still doing for Tyler and some of like my other music stuff, I was starting to build like this more holistic sort of body of work that felt like it was more like me
Hmm.
as opposed to like, you know, the work I was doing in like startups and you know the ad agency. Like I had all of that in my portfolio and I was like like this doesn't really make sense. Like there's like such a clear divide between like the stuff that's like clearly like, you know, my personal kind of passion projects and like that really
Yeah.
had more of like my voice in it. and then like, a 400-page style guide for like a mobile phone company. And none of it so it just didn't make sense. It didn't like look right.
Got it.
So yeah, so like from there I was like, I think I need to like, build a new website and like and start my own like, personal sort of like design studio so that I can really house the body of work that's like, important and more meaningful to me. And so that's like kind of how I launched the idea of it. It really took a while for me to like, fully kind of understand what that really meant and like how I was going to do it. And I guess like sort of build a roadmap of how I was going to develop it and then actually like, start making this a full-time thing.
Mhm.
So it was a really crazy kind of like learning experience. Like, I mean, to this day, I still feel like I don't really know what I'm doing. There's like a lot of like managerial and like business things that I like, have never done before. Um, but I guess, at the end of the day, like I want this to be sort of like a creative hub for myself and also, my peers that I think are involved in all sorts of different things. A space that like really went outside of design, and could really, be a part and be anything, Again, like I think design shouldn't just be like pigeonholed into like a 2D medium. I think it's like uh a process and a language that could be applied to like almost everything. Um, yeah, and then also I guess I wanted the focus to be really kind of music, film, fashion, and yeah, just like kind of like anything in like the entertainment space. Of course, like it goes beyond that as well. But yeah, that's really kind of like the gist of it. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, yeah, congrats. The
Thank
visions
you.
visions becoming clearer and kind of like everything seems like it's pulling together. I think
It's almost there. Yeah.
yeah. So you obviously you did the music videos for Tyler's recent EP. Tell us a bit more about that process. I know, do you do both of them?
No, I just did one. I did a
You did-
Ananas.
yes, and that was the one with the ballroom dancer, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, talk us about the process of the video. The video is sick, absolutely love it.
Thank you.
I've kind of like a party I used to put on, we used to book like Mike Q, who's like a big kind of like
Oh yeah, for sure.
ballroom DJ and
Definitely.
stuff.
Legend.
So yeah, he was like an unspoken resident. He was playing for us like twice a year.
Sick.
This was like around the 2012 to 2016 mark. So like yeah, been to a few balls in New York and stuff over the years. But yeah, tell us a bit more about the video. I thought it was yeah, it was excellent.
Thank you, man. Yeah, for sure. Again, I gotta thank Tyler for kind of like trusting me to do this because I had never made a music video for sure. So I don't know if there's like any other artist that would like allow me to do something like that with a budget and with no body of work in that space. Um, but yeah, I kind of pitched him on this idea. It just started like very simply. I was like, it'd be cool to like make some sort of like visual treatment
Mhm.
um for the song that still kind of ties in with like everything else I was doing, which was like, of course, the album artwork and like the vinyl packaging. And I didn't really have like a core sort of concept yet, and it really kind of happened pretty like serendipitously. There were two like visual references that I just like randomly stumbled upon again, um, on just like YouTube, and like one of them was the music video for Fade by Kanye West,
Yeah.
and then the other was Paris is Burning.
Was the Fade video that was Tiana Taylor, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah. Where
she
she's
was voguing in that, I think, wasn't she?
she was there was some Vogue. It was mostly kind of just like she was just like freestyling, like going at it in
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
gym, all sweaty and shit. And but I thought the song is totally kind of like a ballroom song. And I mean he's sampling like like classic house songs and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and then the other visual reference was Paris is Burning, which, of course, is kind of like the quintessential documentary on, you know, like the New York ballroom scene in the 80s.
Yeah.
So I just like happened to like stumble upon those two references again. I mean, I'd seen them before, but it's been a while since I'd seen either of those two pieces. And the idea just like came from there. But like, wow, like it'd be like super cool to do like just like a really kind of like highly choreographed, like sort of ballroom dance video, you know, but it's not really because like the song is very much kind of like it feels like it's like in that world, you know, it's
Yeah,
super.
there is definitely an energy to that track that sort of lends itself to that sound, definitely.
Mhm,
And like, yeah,
mhm.
I thought it was a really good pairing in terms of visual. Like, um, yeah, I love the way that like the mirror balls being kind of translated and come across and edited. Just in terms of the patterns and reflection, I think when everything goes dark, yeah, man, this I was like, it's quite a hypnotic video. Obviously, the music going with it as well, kind of like obviously adds to the viewing experience. But yeah, I think it was yeah, it was an amazing video, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, it was super fun, and I got to work with some awesome people. Oliver Shahari, who co-directed with me, and also shot a little bit of it, and then our cinematographer Hunter Zimmy, who's awesome and is like, you know, doing a lot of cool stuff. They both are. Yeah, they were really fun to work with and like brought in a lot of like really cool ideas. Particularly like, you know, kind of like enforcing the fact that we should definitely shoot this on film. To also kind of get like that vibe that like Paris is Burning really brought out.
Yeah, because the like there's like yeah, just that VHS-esque kind of quality. It's just kind of like a little fuzzy.
Yeah, it's a little like grittier.
Yeah.
It's dirtier for sure. You know, contrasted with like, you know, the really kind of clubby lights, I think like worked really well.
Mm,
Um,
yeah, it
and
did.
then yeah. And then yeah, I found the ballroom dancer. His name is Jose La Paz Rodriguez, just on like Instagram. You know, I was kind of just like searching through people like involved in the ballroom scene in New York, and he really caught my eye because he comes from like a pretty traditional Vogue, you know, world, but also like brings in a little bit more like contemporary dancing into it.
Mhm,
Even if it's he even like brought in a little bit of like contemporary like ballet into it, which I thought was cool. Because
mhm.
again, like I didn't want the video to like mirror too much into like, you know, Paris is Burning. Like I didn't want to feel like you're watching
Just
like a BTS scene of that. Yeah.
yeah,
So
goes back to that balance again, right? It's like sort of
exactly.
trying to like get the atmosphere and the feel from those references, but then you know kind of modernize it. And yeah, I think yeah, again, I think the choice of dancer, I think yeah, there's definitely like another element to their style. So yeah, definitely brings like a contemporary edge to the video altogether, man. It's yeah, it's just I just thought it was amazing. I think also like the film posters you did for them were super sick as well. I think you did like do like two or three different edits of that.
Yeah, I did. We landed on two. I probably did more. But we had an awesome still photographer named Jessica Kirk, who was just happened to be like visiting the city. So we linked up and I was like, dude, it'd be awesome to like, you know, have you photograph stills for this. That
Mhm.
was also all shot on film. And I kind of, I mean, I love making posters, and I love, you know, I've been starting to like do some posters for movies and for some like smaller film projects. So I thought it'd just be like a fun thing to add to that. It's not really something you really see attached to like a music video. Um, but
Exactly.
it
I
but it
think
did feel like cinematic. So I was like, I think it deserves a poster. So
yeah, it's well, they just look so epic, and I think just like the kind of the dancers pose as well, like, and obviously the way you've edited them, I think we're going to try and do a couple of prints of those, so we'll actually get
oh yeah,
a
that'd be awesome.
physical copy of them. All right, cool. So I guess anything else Studio Provoke wise that's coming up, or you want people to watch out for, or yeah, anything you kind of anything you can share that you're working on at the minute.
Yeah, there's a couple like exciting film projects that I'm working on. I guess I can't talk too much about it, but there's like a couple that I'll be doing, like the titles for,
Mhm.
and trying to like, incorporate more like analog processes into their titles. I think like as almost like a New Year's resolution for my personal work, I want to get off the computer more and just like do more like kind of hands-on things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think, the results of that sort of process is like, in itself like really interesting, and it just like feels so much more physical and real, I guess. So for these couple films, I think we're gonna like, try to do like, processes that were more done in like, the 70s and even before, to get that sort of like aesthetic and just yeah, overall like vibe to it. Um and then there's another film project that I'm gonna be involved in, which is my first time getting more involved in like the production side of it,
Cool.
which will be fun. Yeah, I guess that's also something that I want the studio to kind of like dive in a little bit more on, is not just like, again, like not just design, but doing more like production type work, like that music video, like those kind of projects are things that, that we'll definitely be trying to like focus on and get into more. Um, what else? There's a couple of branding projects, which I'm excited for, like more in like the fashion space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, so look out for that.
Nice.
Uh,
Big start to the year then.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. Just
It
gotta
it
stay
sounds like
organized and focused. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It sounds like you're on a sounds like you're on a good path with it all. Any oh actually before we sign off, there was a couple of questions
sure.
that I was going to ask earlier. Have you got like a top three or top five like album covers?
Oh, that's such a hard one. Um, uh,
They can be interchangeable, so in the future we're not going to hold you to it right now. But I don't know if there's
okay.
any that spring to mind as soon as I said that you're willing to share.
Yeah, yeah, okay, okay. Well, actually, so yeah, going back to like Justice, the Cross album,
Mm,
I still think that's like one of the coolest covers of all time. And I don't have it personally, but when that album was first released, I think they came out with like a limited additional edition vinyl press where you fold it out and actually like folds out into a cross.
amazing.
So I could always appreciate, I mean, I love like physical media and like, physical media that just does kind of like more like bespoke kind of cool things like that.
Mhm.
Um, so that one for sure. And I think it's just like an like super iconic, like really smart symbol and logo that like represents the band perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, ah, so two more, huh?
Two more, yeah, and as long only if they come to mind. If not, I got another quick fire question.
Okay, wait, actually, hold up. I got one. This came from my mom's vinyl collection,
What?
YMO,
Yellow Magic?
Yellow Magic Orchestra.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, the like
So
kind of
sick.
iconic synth group from Japan. Yeah,
Amazing.
Solid State Survivor. This cover I think is so cool.
Yeah,
And
that's
the inner
super sick.
sleeves and like and the back is awesome too. I just like love the art direction. It's just like
Oh,
so weird and
amazing.
kind of funky.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one for sure. I always kind of forget about this one. I'm just like it's such a funky, weird, quirky cover.
Yeah. Was that like 80s?
I think yeah, or like late
Late
70s.
70s?
Yeah, but yeah, and the record is also just fantastic. I mean, there's so many gems on it.
Nice. And then
Yeah.
what about artists or designers then? Are there any like strongholds that you have just yeah
Um,
followed over the years or always go back to or got a soft spot
yeah,
for?
that's a good one. That's a good question. I mean, there's so many. I think really the first one that comes to mind, who I just kind of have always followed and admired, and I try to base my career off of like, what he went through, even though it's like nothing close to it. But Peter Saville of like Factory Records.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I I just like, again, I think he's like such an interesting conceptual designer in the way that he really pushed design to just go outside of the 2D medium. He was designing nightclubs and physical objects. He even designed his own coffin when he died, and that was
Amazing.
cataloged in like the factory records like archive.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so
Amazing.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely left his stamp on yeah, like kind of yeah, I guess art culture, music culture.
Totally, for
Yeah,
sure.
very epic.
Fashion as well. Yeah,
Yeah, fashion. Yeah, just yeah, epic. I mean, yeah, definitely a great reference point for, like you said, for kind of like where you're coming from with Studio Provoke and everything you try and do with your kind of output as well. So definitely. And then I guess yeah, we will kind of wrap up now, but I'm just thinking, is there anything else, any shout outs you want to give, any final wise parting words? Obviously, you've just established your own studio. That's a big feat in itself. So, yeah, any shout outs or parting words?
shouts out to you guys. You and
Thank you.
Tyler both. Yeah. Excited for, all the cool projects coming out of Interference Pattern, and looking forward to like just continue working on that, and more t-shirts.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Right
Cool,
on,
man.
man.
Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been good to kind of yeah, like kind of get behind, put have a peek behind the curtain of like how kind of how graphics and art directions put together from a music label. And I don't see too many people talking about it, so I think it's always good to understand the process and making references, inspiration points, and stuff like that. So, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, we'll catch up very soon, no doubt.